Then action program.
All right. Is everyone seeing the screen, my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
Yes.
So,
Right.
Stacy, you could get things started. Our MC, Stacy, you could get things started.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just give me 1 minute. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Um, Today, and I would say good afternoon in all spheres. So we are very grateful that all of you have made the time to be here. We're saying good afternoon. We have a list of dignitaries here, and we will say all protocols observed. But we do want to acknowledge the Honorable Dr. Nyan Gadsby Dolly, Mrs. Erica Williams Connell, Dr. Desmond Hartwell Maury, Dr. Donald Bedney, and we have with us Dr. Selwyn Kojo, Dr. Akil Maury, Dr. Carol Boyce Davies, Dr. Isaiah Warner, Dr. David Williams, Dr. Meredith Gray, and Dr. Walter B.T. Douglas. All our dignitaries, all our specially invited guests, we are thankful that you are here with us today, and we are marking a monumental occasion. And ladies and gentlemen, Andrews University marks for us the epitome of Christian education. So many of us can boast of our advancements because of the type of education that we were able to receive through Andrews University, as well as other universities connected with Andrews University. However, today we are taking it a bit further, where we have acknowledged the first visit of, we would say, a prime minister of any nation to Andrews University, and that would be the Honorable Dr. Eric Williams. And, I know when Dr. Maury approached me, he said, I cannot think of a more patriotic person. Patriotism oozes from my very being. And I love my country. Many historians who have spoken about that transition from being under the colonial rule would have, in many instances, referenced our Dr. Eric Williams for being the forerunner that he was. That transition that he made from our colonial rule to being independent and becoming a republic. He went to Andrews University, but it was just not a visit for us. For us, it marked an entrance into what we were able to do in the Caribbean, being stripped of our resources, and the historians will tell you that as they come along. And so, as we marry these two bodies, as we marry these two um, forces, we are happy today to present many individuals who were there, who understand what happened around that. And as we go on, we are hoping that you would not only learn, but you will feel that togetherness that we felt hearing about this, for those of us who weren't there, and for those who were there actually experiencing this monumental event. So, good afternoon and welcome. We really hope that this session would give you an experience of a lifetime. At this time, I want to introduce a student.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Our online thing.
Let me mute Nadine. Okay, yes. Um, at this time, I want to introduce a student of the University of the Southern Caribbean. Her name is Rukaya Abdul Haq. You will see that she comes up under my name because the both laptops have me on, and she's having some problems changing the name on that one. So it's my daughter, Rukaya Abdul Haq. She's currently a third-year history student at the University of the Southern Caribbean. She has an emphasis too in legal studies. Rukaya also is the current representative of Trinidad and Tobago for the upcoming Portrait of Excellence pageant. So without further ado, Rukaya would come on to introduce the other dignitaries that we have for the next part of this session.
So, Stacy,
Yes?
remember we need to do the national.
Oh, yes, I am so sorry.
That's okay.
So at this time, I'll pass you over to Dr. Maury, who will take us through the preceding event.
Yeah. All right. So we'll play the national anthem of Trinidad and Tobago. And we will also play the
Yeah, it's the same thing that's happening.
the Andrews song.
From north and south, from east and west, we come to you. From fair land, from sunny isle, across the our souls you kingdom with a fan of lofty purpose you inspire. You help us reach our heart's desire. We thank you for the friendships true we owe to you. For memories that will warm our hearts for long. Through these friends with us will all be true to golden days of golden blue. His purpose meant and spirit us and near. Our hearts beat high with love and loyalty. We pledge ourselves to you for service grand in every land. our dear AU, for service grand in every land, our dear AU.
All right, very nice. So now here's the program, and Rukaya, Amariah, you can go ahead and introduce our opening speaker.
What's the street? Main 107 North Main Street. No, I don't know of it.
turn off their-
Yeah, I know another place that has the
Somebody needs
CBD.
to turn off their, please turn off your, mute your mic.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope we're all having a good day today. As mentioned before, my name is Rukaya Abdul Haq, and I am a current history major at the University of the Southern Caribbean. Today, I will just be introducing some of our opening guests. So first we have Dr. Donald L. Bedney. He's the President of the University Advancement. He's the Vice President for University Advancement, bringing extensive experience from roles such as a teacher, pastor, and director of various organizations, including Andrews University. He holds a law degree from the University of Notre Dame and is a certified fundraising executive. An alumnus of Andrews, he provides strategic leadership in philanthropy. He is married to, sorry about that. I'm watching my mom here. Elinda Bedney, Assistant Vice President for Student Financial Services. And they have 2 sons and 2 daughter-in-laws and 4 grandchildren. So moving on, we have Dr. Desmond Hartwell Murray. He is an associate professor of chemistry at Andrews University, making nearly 30 years of college teaching since starting in 1980 at Harmon STA High School, in Tobago. His professional focus includes early research and public science. He is the lead editor and chapter author of the 2016 ACS Synopsium book, The Power of Promise Early Research. As the founding director of the early research, Dr. Murray has received numerous accolades, including the 2010 Thought Leader in Science Education and 2012 College Teacher of the Year for Michigan. He has initiated multimedia public science projects, such as Environmental Fridays, which we are so fond of today. He had a great session on Friday pertaining to the indigenous people of Trinidad and Tobago. So he is very involved within his area of study. Dr. Murray has earned his undergraduate degree from Andrews University, his PhD from Wayne State University, and completed a postdoctoral scholarship at Harvard. He received the John Nevins Andrews Medallion in 2018 and currently serves as the ACS Committee for Minority Affairs and the DEIR Expert Panel. Following Dr. Murray, we have Miss Erica Williams Connell. She is the daughter of the Honorable Dr. Eric Williams, the first Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. She resides currently in Miami with her daughter and granddaughter. For 40 years, she has been married to James Connell, who passed away in 2015. Miss Williams Connell leads the Eric Williams Memorial Collection Research Library, Archives, and Museum at the University of the West Indies, inaugurated in 1998 by Colin Powell and recognized by UNESCO in 1999. UNESCO, sorry. She has taught in the Black Exchange Executive Program at Florida Memorial College and lectured at various institutions, including the University of North Carolina and Johns Hopkins University. Ms. Williams Connell has addressed the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago and has shared the stage with notable figures at significant events and commemorating her father's legacy. Following, we have the Honorable Dr. Nyan Gatsby-Dully, completed her primary education at San Juan STA Primary School and attended St. Augustine Girls High School. She earned her bachelor's degree in analytical chemistry, a postgraduate diploma in educational technology. As an educator for 11 years, she began her career at St. Francois Girls College and later served as a senior lecturer at Custat. An avid reader and researcher, Dr. Gatsby-Dully is a member of the Lydian Singers and authored her first book, Nyan Inside Out, in 2021. She is passionate about youth motivation and success in the lives of and success. As a mother of 3 teenagers re-elected in 2020, she currently serves as the Minister of Education in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Rukaya. At this time, we will go ahead and listen to Dr. Bedney.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my privilege to be with you this afternoon on behalf of Andrews University, our president, John Wesley Taylor V.
Dr. Bedney, we aren't hearing you.
Oh, I hear them.
Some of us are hearing
I'm
him.
hearing him. We're hearing.
I'll try to be a little louder. Sorry.
We are hearing him.
We're hearing you.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
On behalf of John, our president, John Wesley Taylor V, along with the faculty, staff, and students of Andrews University, it's my privilege to be able to say welcome to you to this program. As you have already heard, we are, as a university, we are commemorating our 150th year celebration of the existence of the university and open our arms to other opportunities to celebrate events that have taken place. One of those events is one that, as you know today, that took place on October 27th of 1974. As you know, on that day, Dr. Eric E. Williams, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, received an honorary doctorate of letters degree and delivered the key address. At the dedication of the day, we celebrate and commemorate that event. We're delighted to be able to, again, welcome each one of you to this program. And it is our fondest prayer and wish that each one of you will be blessed as you reflect on this event. We're thankful also to have, to Ms. Eric Williams Connell, we're thankful to have you here and others who have come for this occasion. We want you to enjoy the moments, and we wish all of you the best as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, VP Bedney. So I'm up next. So I'll be talking a bit here about, is everybody hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you okay.
Okay, good. I'll be talking a bit about Black contributions to Andrews University. I begin first with a quote from James Baldwin, African-American writer and civil rights activist, who wrote, "History is not the past. It is the present. We carry our history with us. We are our history." Consider these words as we reflect. Somebody needs to mute, please. Mute. Yes, so consider these words today as we reflect on the events and times of 50 years ago and on Black contributions to Andrews University. The contributions of the Black diaspora to Andrews University over its 150 years are undeniable, especially so given that our contributions were often made under the duress of low expectations. As it has been in society, so has it been in religion, science, and university. The Black diaspora has been burdened by no choice of our own in a continuous struggle for recognition and respect of our full humanity. For more than half of its 150 years, Andrews University was ostensibly and often intentionally been white. Today, there are obvious differences as documented in Andrews University's 2024 diversity report. 26% of Andrews University's students are Black and constitute the highest of any demographic group. This is not your grandfather's university. This increase is also very significant given that less students in the United States are attending college and that the cost of college is now higher. It was only really in the 60s and the 70s, 1960s and 1970s, that Andrews University began to significantly increase its non-white demographics. Notwithstanding cross-burnings, anti-Black policies, and often blatant disrespect and indifference for Black faculty, staff, and students. These facts are documented and detailed in 2 books about the Andrews story by Professor Emeriti Meredith Jones Gray. Those books are called As We Set Forth and Forward in Faith. In 1974, on Sunday, October 27th, during the centennial year of Andrews University, the Science Complex was dedicated by the late Dr. Eric Eustace Williams, world-famous historian and then Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago. He was the very first head of government to visit Andrews. However, in February of 1974, a second cross-burning on the campus of Andrews University occurred following the first cross-burning 5 years earlier. In 1974, within months of each other, 2 opposing forces, light and darkness, good and evil, were at play. One, the righteous affirmation and honoring of Black excellence and contribution in the person of Eric Williams. The other, a raw, naked contempt of and violence against Black personhood, identity, and our God-given humanity. In fact, even now, with a much greater campus diversity, even now with increased contributions of Black families to Andrews University revenue, there still remains serious work to be done regarding the infrastructure and institutionalization of diversity, equity, inclusion, respect, and belonging. Indeed, there are recent, recurrent, and documented instances of disrespecting and demeaning the work, the person, reputation, and contributions of Black faculty and staff. At times, it has been nothing less than a hostile work and learning environment. I know of several specific instances within my almost 30 years as a student, professor, and researcher at the university. So, as we celebrate the 150th anniversary of Andrews University, it is important to highlight Black contributions while telling the truth. No amount of benign acceptance, administrative pretense, religiosity, and whitewashing will co-opt and corrupt the truth, material evidence, life experiences, and contributions of the Black community, past, present, or future at this university. Furthermore, it is imperative as a faith-based educational institution that our mission wholly embraces the full humanity, diversity, potential of all its students. Our corporate mindset and practices must align fully with these words penned by the major Adventist influencer Ellen G. White in her book, Education. She writes in a simple but powerful statement, in every human being, he, meaning Christ, meaning God, discerned infinite possibilities. In every human being, he discerned infinite possibilities. Being faithful to our claims and mission must mean being fully committed in word and deed to seeing and treating each other not as statistical minorities or majorities, but as God created and God redeemed infinite possibilities. It is past time that we all recognize that the Black community of Andrews University is a divine blessing to Andrews University. We are both the prophecy and the present reality of the kingdom of God, of what Martin Luther King Jr. called the beloved community, and what the Revelation celebrates as the great multitude. We are the literal fruits of the global evangelization of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. We are first-class citizens and stakeholders of church and university, equal to all, less than none, and must be treated as such, for such is the kingdom of heaven. Today, this event is a remembrance of a Black contribution to the ongoing story of Andrews University. Much respect and recognition goes to Dr. Walter B.T. Douglas and the late Samuel L. Gadsby for being instrumental in having Dr. Eric Williams officially visit Andrews University during its centennial year for the historic dedication of our science complex. 50 years to the day, Sunday, October 27, 1974, history to the day, Sunday, October 27th, 2024. I thank you all, participants and audience, for being part of this 50th anniversary commemoration. I especially thank Mrs. Erica Williams Cornell for her friendship, partnership, and support in birthing this event. Finally, as the university embraces founded in faith, forward in mission, it must be said that faith is necessary but insufficient. Faith without works is dead. Faith without the works of reconciliation, inclusion, equity, building the beloved community, building the kingdom of heaven, without the works of love is dead. Likewise, demographics are necessary, but insufficient in building a healthy multicultural society and university. I pray that my university will be true to its word and its fate evidenced by its works. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Desmond Hatwell Maury, for that very insightful opening remarks. Now we invite Mrs. Erica Williams Connell.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, Andrews University Vice President, panelists, invited guests. All protocols duly observed. The problems of contemporary life are merely the climax of the problems which the distinctive ages of history have always had to face. The past can be related to the present, and in a manner which does not burden it. That was Eric Williams in his autobiography, Inward Hunger, The Education of a Prime Minister. And on this very auspicious occasion of the 50th anniversary commemoration of his speech at Andrews University's convocation and dedication of its new science building, I would like to especially thank Dr. Desmond Murray for its genesis and organization, and not least of all, for his tireless and enthusiastic devotion to the objectives of the Eric Williams Memorial Collection, Research Library, Archives, and Museum at the University of the West Indies in Trinidad and Tobago, which I represent today. Not being a scholar myself, I must confess I had not before now read Eric Williams's speech, Religion, Science, University, and Racism. But I am struck, and not for the first time, at how prescient his words were, and how Frantz Fanon's profound question is still hugely relevant today. Can the white man behave healthily toward the black man? And can the black man behave healthily toward the white man? The wanton killing on video of Black George Floyd in 2020 by a white cop, as well as that of the less-known white Ariel Roman by a black policewoman in 2022, suggests not. But I pose another question that Fanon did not contemplate. Can a black man behave healthily toward a black man? As in the murder of African-American Tyree Nichols by 5 black Memphis, Tennessee police officers in 2023. It is clear, however, that we have come a long way from Williams's 1944 research on racial discrimination in Puerto Rico, where university students posited God made the Negro so that animals can rest. Or his citation of Australia, which was to be reserved as a place where the English race shall be spread from sea to sea, unmixed with any lower caste who would debase by their intermixture the nobler European race. Ironically, in 1967 in the US, where only 3% of couples enjoyed interracial marriages, today this has increased to some 20%. But obviously there is still much left undone in education and remuneration, for example. In the United States, according to the US Department of the Treasury in July 2022, racial disparities in outcomes predictive of future success appear early in life. In 2010, math skills at kindergarten entry were over half a standard deviation higher for white students than for Black or Hispanic students, with similar disparities in reading skills. The median household income in 2020 was roughly $46,000 and $55,500 for Black and Hispanic workers, respectively, compared to $75,000 and $95,000 for white and Asian households. With the upcoming highly contested presidential election and its decidedly racial tone, one might well wonder how this disproportion will ever, in the immediate future, achieve parity. Do you, for instance, think that if the guest workers from Springfield, Ohio were from Slovenia, there would be any question at all about them eating dogs and cats? So let's now talk about religion, which was then, as it is presently, intimately connected to race and racism. African slavery, says Williams, was the foundation of church power in the New World. Catholic Portuguese bishops in Angola blessed slave cargoes departing for Brazil. He further characterizes as militant the church as a whole in the Americas and recalls Jesuit priest and theologian Loyola, who stated emphatically, "What I see is white is black, if the church so defines it." The church was king. Sound familiar? Today, with the rise of extremist white Christian nationalism, with all that that implies, with those ascribing to it openly promoting a Christian America to the exclusion of all other faiths and in direct contravention of the US Constitution, violence to achieve a certain result is being widely encouraged, as in neo-Nazi collaborator Jack Posobiec. "I'm a Christian, but I'm done turning the other cheek." Or another white supremacist, Nick Fuentes, "We will make them die in the holy war." Rioters on January 6, 2020 prayed before and after storming the Capitol, utilizing biblical verses to condone their nefarious actions. Leadership requires killing people. Sorry, asserts former Fox News host Tucker Carlson. And this desire by way too large a section of the US population to live in a homogeneous America where, again, the church is king, extends to and impacts every facet of modern life. What women do with their own bodies, what our children read and learn in libraries and schools, rampant gun violence being embodied in that, what is taught in our universities, the civil rights we enjoy, the dismantling of our institutions, frankly, what we say, and even what we think. When America's youth poet laureate Amanda Gorman's books are banned, the situation becomes alarmingly reminiscent of Williams again, the Spanish obliteration in the 1500s of Amerindian records and parchments, and the 1930s Nazi book burnings. Witness the through line. The issues of science and university pretty much go hand in hand as well. There has been a deliberate attempt in several American colleges and universities to diminish, if not to completely eliminate, certain programs and all-encompassing policies. Even in some states, to install like-minded administrators who will do the necessary according to the powers that be. Universities everywhere have traditionally been bastions of free intellectual thought and debate, of meaningful opposition to the status quo. Students are supposed to be trained to think critically, not to accept at face value, to question, to demand answers. And yes, there are professors who need to exit their ivory towers and attend to the real rather than the hypothetical world. But to dismiss the browning of America, which demands inclusivity, as actor Tyler Perry recently said, America is a patchwork quilt. Some choose to see it as a sheet, and a white one at that. To denigrate university research, decades of study of a range of global and community problems, is to regress to ancient civilizations in 6th century BC that believed the earth was flat. Take climate change. Global warming has been widely acknowledged by environmental scientists for 40 years. In fact, it is estimated that the next 7 years is humanity's best window to enact bold transformational changes in our global economy. And what does America do? Bail out of the Paris Climate Agreement and become the world's largest producer of oil. The first, through sheer and willful ignorance and disregard of science. The second, due to the political necessity of keeping us happy by reducing the price of gas. What is utterly incomprehensible is, even if you ignore or worse, deny the science, surely you have the evidence before your lying eyes. Accumulations of more than 60.5 inches of rain in some parts of Texas during Hurricane Harvey in 2017. A heat wave in 2020 that virtually melted Siberia. A total of 71 tornadoes occurring in one day in December 2021 across the central and southern United States. the once-in-a-generation bomb cyclone in December 2022 that saw temperatures fall to minus 63 degrees Fahrenheit in Western Canada. 2 Category 3 and 4 hurricanes making landfall on the east coast of Florida within 2 weeks of each other in September and October 2024. And again, in the hotly challenged presidential election, there are initiatives being bruited about that would shutter the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, the very department we rely on in extreme weather incidents, the Department of Energy's Office of Clean Energy, and the Office of Domestic Climate Policy, to name just a few. That is where we are, folks, and we would do well to heed history's warnings. Drawing on Williams's subject matter of half a century ago, it is as pertinent today, albeit with a variation in circumstances, as it was then. So I close as I began with his words. History is not a record of battles and politicians, dates and events, or even of the follies and foibles of mankind, but rather a record of the development of humanity, of life, and of society in all their various manifestations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams-Connell, for that very insightful set of opening remarks. At this time, we will invite the Honorable Dr. Nyan Gatsby-Dolly to give her opening remarks.
Good afternoon, and I hope I'm being heard by everyone.
Yes.
It is a pleasure to be here. Even as I observe the protocols that have been established, I want to recognize Dr. Desmond Murray for his organization of the event, and of course the representative of the president in his absence, and Mrs. Erica Williams-Connell, and all other distinguished guests that are present. It is an honor to join with you as we reflect on one of the most profound addresses given by our late Prime Minister, Dr. Eric Eustace Williams. Of course, in Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Williams is revered, and I believe in the Caribbean region as well as the world, revered as a man of extraordinary vision, whose words continue to shape our understanding of education and society. Or indeed, his words today seem more apt than they were when he would have penned them so many years ago. He spoke boldly on interwoven themes of religion, science, university, and racism in a time where these utterances were deemed even radical, but they were necessary for us to confront historical divisions and to forge a more inclusive future. And indeed, by being the radical that he was, he would have pushed for changes that impact us in the Caribbean region, in Trinidad and Tobago, and indeed in the world. Central to his message was a simple yet profound conviction: knowledge must be accessible to all. He believed that while education serves as a tool for individual success, it also holds a higher purpose, building pathways towards collective liberation and social justice. In Trinidad and Tobago, the social mobility of many of our people depended on this view and this vision of Dr. Eric Williams that saw liberation come through education. He understood that through education, we possess the power to transform societies, dismantle prejudice, and to empower future generations. 62 years on since becoming a nation, we can attest in Trinidad and Tobago that the empowerment of the future generations has come as he would have fought for. And sitting before you on your screens now would be a product of that empowerment of a future generation. As we honor his vision today, we strive to equip our students not only with academic rigor, but also with the moral and ethical grounding that religion and spirituality can and does provide. It also has a personal connection for me, as I share with the history. My grandfather was Samuel Lionel Gadsby, a contemporary of Dr. Williams. And they shared a vision rooted in commitment to education and national progress. Like Dr. Williams, my grandfather believed deeply in the profound impact of education. And he would have been very instrumental in sharing this vision throughout our family. And even to my time, was very instrumental in my own education, being a foundation and a rock upon which I could have stood. And it is that vision that guides me today in my role. Together, their legacies inspire me to strive tirelessly to make education accessible, equitable, and a true vehicle for social change and mobility. Also a vehicle that fosters the positive values, attitudes, and behaviors that we speak about when we speak to the mandate of education in Trinidad and Tobago and in the world. For us in Trinidad and Tobago, we take it very personally. Our mandate in education is to develop the ideal Trinidad and Tobago citizen. And that's not just someone that has academic certification, but also has the values, attitudes, and behaviors that are productive and progressive, and that would allow us as a country to progress and to achieve the milestones of our national developmental agenda. Joining you today, I am humbled to continue their work, to bridge the link with the past and the future, and to ensure that the generations to come, including my own children, inherit an education system and indeed a Trinidad and Tobago that empowers them to lead, to question, and to build a more just and inclusive world. Dr. Williams taught us that. He lived that. And our benefit today in Trinidad and Tobago is because of his vision and his work for inclusion and equity. So today, as we remember the values Dr. Williams championed, in his view, universities were sanctuaries of knowledge, and they were a place to confront our differences, not to perpetuate them, to respect them. Indeed, our watchwords that he gave to Trinidad and Tobago were discipline, production, and tolerance. He called on us to challenge barriers and biases and to redefine what it means to be an academic, a citizen, a human. And he brought these things together in a way that showed us that it was possible to be all of them at the same time. So I am very, very pleased to join with you as we commemorate this vision. I want to thank Mrs. Erica Williams Connell and Andrews University, and I thank Mrs. Connell especially for her role in establishing the Eric Williams Memorial Library, which was a very important project for our country and which stands as a testament of his contribution not only to Trinidad and Tobago, but to the region and the world. We thank you today for commemorating his legacy and for championing his vision, and it has been my pleasure to be a part of this. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Nyan Gadsby Dolly.
Very well.
Yes.
At this time, I want to say a special thank you to all our participants giving the opening remarks, Dr. Donald Bedney, Dr. Desmond Hartwell Maury, Mrs. Erica Williams Connell, and the Honorable Dr. Nyan Gadsby Dolly. I can safely say, and I think I can say this for all of us listening, that I felt as though we got invaluable history lessons. We got a vivid picture of our current milieu. We also are empowered for the future. I certainly am very, very proud to be a part of so many facets represented here today. At this time, before we move into our reflections, we have another student from the University of the Southern Caribbean in the person of Renee Lewis. She's one of my very own students. Renee is completing a bachelor's degree in English with an emphasis in linguistics and education. Renee is currently the president of the Trinidad and Tobago Cultural Club of the University of the Southern Caribbean. At this time, Renee will give us the introductions for our next two speakers.
Good afternoon, everyone. So thank you, Ms. Norgay, for that introduction. And now we move into the historical reflection segment, where we would hear from two accomplished speakers which is Dr. Meredith Jones-Gray and Dr. Walter B.T. Douglas. Now, Dr. Meredith Jones-Gray grew up on the campuses of the Emmanuel Missionary College and Andrews University, where her father taught mathematics there. In her later years, she completed a bachelor's in French and a master's in English at Andrews University. And further, she completed her doctoral work in English language and literature at the University of Michigan. She comes to us with 42 years of combined experience as a professor emerita and the author of 2 volumes outlining the history of the Andrews University, as well as the Emmanuel Missionary and Battle Creek Colleges. The later of her collections was published in September 2024. And now the second speaker, Dr. Walter B.T. Douglas, is a professor emeriti in church history and the history of religion, and he hails from the Isle of Grenada. He served as a chair of church history of the church history department and as a professor in the Department of History of Religion at the Seventh-day Adventist Theological Seminary. In addition to that, his career spans over 35 years, and he has received countless accolades for his work. And he also happens to recall his interactions with the late Dr. Eric Eustace Williams in his youth. And I now transition over to them as they carry on with this segment.
Okay, so Meredith, it's your turn.
Thank you so much. It's an honor for me to be part of this commemorative event. And I've been inspired by the opening remarks that we've heard.
Yes, I'll mute. Okay, go ahead, Meredith.
I've been inspired by the opening remarks that I've heard along with the rest of you. So Dr. Murray has asked me to say a little bit about what I remember of October 27, 1974, and the dedication of the Science Complex. And then based on my historical research, to reflect on the significance of this building for the university and on the importance of Dr. Williams' visit to Andrews University for the dedication. Thanks to Dr. Murray's reminder about the day of October 27, 1974, I know exactly what I was doing 50 years ago this afternoon. And it's not often that we get to experience that kind of specific window on our past and on our memories. In 1974, I was beginning my junior year at Andrews University. And like most students, I had a campus job. And my job was at the university greenhouses, which I think is why I was invited to be a student host for the open house at the Science Complex. And my assigned post was at the greenhouse, the biology department's greenhouse on the very top of the building, the roof of the building. After the ribbon cutting ceremony, the building was opened up for the campus and community to come in and tour the new facilities. So part of the schedule for the student hosts was, of course, to be at our posts long before the ribbon cutting ceremony started. And as a result, I was unable to go to the church or to hear Dr. Williams' address at the church. I was waiting for the crowds to appear. After the service at Pioneer Memorial Church, the congregation marched across campus to the Science Complex for the ribbon cutting ceremony. And my vantage point of that event, as I remember it, was from high up in the building, looking down at the plaza below me. The thing that made the greatest impression on me at the time was the music, maybe because that's the only thing I could actually hear from inside the building. And it was a brass ensemble, and I believe that they played Aaron Copland's Fanfare for the Common Man, which I found very stirring and became an instant favorite. And in my mind, that piece of music will always be associated with the bird's eye view of the Science Complex Plaza. So you can see that my memories of that day are of a lowly student, quite far removed from the main event. But in my research recently, on the history of Andrews University, I've developed a new perspective of the importance of that moment in the history of Andrews University. I focused exactly on the era in which the science complex was built and inaugurated. And from what I learned about the details of the history of the building, from conception to completion to the consecration service, my impression is that this project marked a new phase in the growth of Andrews University. I want to mention three aspects that in that maturation process, because we must remember that although that year of 1974, we were celebrating the centennial of the institution, the university itself was only barely 15 years old and was still very much an emerging university. I'm going to start with finances, which is a very mundane topic, but very important and necessary, of course. We all know that buildings begin with money and fundraising. The original projection was that the science complex would cost $2.5 million. Now, up until this point, the college, Emmanuel Missionary College, and now Andrews University, had funded most of its projects on campus through in-house campaigns and church subsidies. That was the norm. But President Richard Hamill was keenly aware that that was not going to be adequate for a project of this magnitude. And he told the board that quite explicitly and directly. He said to them, "This means that for the next year and a half, my time will be taken up almost entirely in soliciting funds because we're going to have to turn to the public funds for this project." Dr. Hamill was not a natural fundraiser. He was a scholar and a rather retiring man in his personality, but he embarked on this task with determination. The first thing he did was to reach out to community entities and leaders here in Berrien County, such as Robert Upton of the Whirlpool Corporation and Lester Tiscornia of the Auto Specialties Manufacturing Company. The kind of partnership that had never been forged before, really, between Andrews University and the surrounding community. Those men and others signed on to lead in the community fundraising, the local fundraising, and within 6 months had raised over $1 million. So that was a real blessing to the university. It was a blessing partly because of that new relationship, the sense that the community had a stake in Andrews University by participating in that fundraising campaign. It also began to redefine the role of the president of the university with a greater emphasis on fundraising. And it put our development program and office at Andrews on a whole new professional footing under the leadership of Don Pryor. Before that, the development office had been very localized and I would say probably parochial, and that had changed with this project. The second area I want to talk about is that this project symbolized a recommitment to academic excellence on the part of the university, and especially, interestingly, to the undergraduate programs, because we became a university because of the addition of the graduate programs, but it also meant that the undergraduate programs were bolstered in their excellence as well as we entered the university era. I think we all know, those of us who've been involved in Adventist higher education, that making do is a sort of the way we go about things in this culture. And that was true of the science and mathematics and technology programs at Andrews University in the early 1960s. When the accrediting team came to the campus and spoke with Dr. Hamill, one of the things that one of the team members said to him is, "Science at Andrews is underground." And that indicated how scattered and unsupported those programs were at the time period. The biology department was in the best circumstance. It was housed in Marsh Hall, a brick building that had been built in 1956, but it was easily growing out of that space. It was a department that generated more than 11% of the student hours at the university and had a very active research program, and the facilities were no longer adequate for them. Physics and engineering had just moved into the basement of the campus center, which was new, but the basement was so new that it was still raw and unfinished and not really ready for prime time, we might say. Dr. Edward Specht, the chair of the math department, used to joke that the math department had been housed in all of the basements on campus, and that really wasn't an exaggeration. And that's where they were in the 1960s and the early 70s, was in the basement of one of the oldest buildings on campus, still standing on campus. But the department that worried Dr. Hamill the most was the chemistry department. It was still in a building that had been built in 1931 and 32. You saw a picture of it there in some of the pictures that Dr. Murray presented at the very beginning. And it was a wooden building, 40 years old, and a chemistry department. And I leave you to draw your own conclusions about why that worried him at the time period. So bringing all these departments together in one modern building with up-to-date facilities and the equipment and space needed for instruction and research, by doing that, Andrews demonstrated its desire to pursue STEM education at a university level. So you can see that this was a very significant project for the institution. And the capstone of all of this planning and hard work and anticipation was, of course, the dedication service on October 27, 1974. And the invitation to the Honorable Eric Williams, first Prime Minister for Trinidad and Tobago, to grace this auspicious event with his presence. I would rather have you hear how that came about from Dr. Douglas. It's really his story to tell. But I do want to say a couple of things about what I think was the historical significance of that invitation in the development of Andrews University. The year 1974 and the celebration of the university's centennial came on the heels of racial tensions on campus. And by 1974, as you've heard, they were hardly completely resolved and still aren't. Dr. Williams' central role in the dedication service and the topic of his address, religion, science, university, and racism, demonstrated especially Dr. Richard Hamill's realization of the moral imperative for the university to give a voice to all of the members of its community. Also, by inviting an international statesman, the highest ranking official to ever visit the Andrews University campus, to be part of this signature project and high moment in its history, the institution acknowledged its growing international student population and their importance, as well as its own international footprint. And finally, by hosting this world-famous historian and scholar, inviting Dr. Williams to speak about his own academic research and awarding him an honorary doctorate of laws, Andrews University signaled its commitment to scholarship, to becoming a full-fledged university, and to joining the broader academic conversation. So in all these ways, I believe Dr. Williams' presence and participation in the dedication of the science complex marked an important moment in the maturation of Andrews University. In conclusion, I'd like to read the closing paragraphs from a historical document, the Act of Dedication, that was read at the service at Pioneer Memorial Church 50 years ago today. Believing that the edifice of science rests upon God's unchangeableness and that his creative mind pervades the universe, we enjoin those who learn and those who teach within these walls to press their quest for truth where it may lead, but always in humility and faith, ever welcoming his presence. Believing that science properly applied can ease man's pain, loose him from the bondage of toil, and free him to pursue his destiny as the crowning achievement of creation, we adjure those who leave these walls to devote their skills to noble purposes, purposes of peace and not of war, purposes of harmony and not of discord. To all these ends, we dedicate this building. Thank you.
Awesome. Very nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Gray, for that insightful account of what happened at that time. And now we are getting ready for Dr. Walter Douglas to give us his account.
So Dr. Douglas couldn't make it today, but I do have a 10-minute video that he and I did a year ago, February 2023. So I'll go ahead and play it, and it will be self-explanatory. Let me just share my screen here. And open this up. Okay, is everybody seeing the screen?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can see it.
Okay, good. So I'll start playing right here. It's going to be about 10 minutes. It's a 36-minute long video. We're not going to do that. Just 10 minutes that talks about how Eric Williams came to Andrews University. And so you joined the faculty of Andrews in 1972. And then 2 years later, which is kind of remarkable, you invited the very first head of state to the campus. So I know you knew of him, about him, as both a scholar and a statesman, a politician. But did you know him personally, and what did you know of him?
Yes, indeed. As a matter of fact, when I was a student at Caribbean Union College, now University of the Southern Caribbean, I had the privilege of working in the college press. Mm-hmm. And at that time, Dr. Williams was just in the process of getting his party, the PNM, started. And he chose the college press to be the vehicle for the publication, the printing and publication of his paper and his manifesto. And while working there, I had the privilege of chatting with him whenever he came to talk to the superintendent of the college press. And I was so honored to know that he was such an outstanding scholar, a liberator, an emancipator, one who radicalized my view of what was going on in Trinidad at the time and helped prepare me for my career as a historian.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. So you actually interacted with him when he came to the press?
Oh, yes. Many times.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I was about 16 or 17 years old at the time.
Are you serious?
Yes, indeed.
Wow. That is really fantastic. Wow. So the other question I was going to follow up with is, what connections did you have to him? But it seems like you had an early connection. And
yes.
How did this visit come to be? Did you speak to him directly about this? What was the process?
The process started when I was chosen, which was quite an unusual thing. A new professor being chosen to serve on the honorary degrees committee for the university.
Oh.
And while we were having a discussion, I recommended his name to receive an honorary degree, Dr. Blaw's degree. And after much discussion, I got the committee to vote to honor him in that fashion. So what I did once it was voted, I made contact with an old friend of mine who was a close friend of Dr. Williams. His name was Samuel Gadsby. A close friend indeed with Dr. Williams. So I made contact with Elder S.L. Gadsby, who in turn contacted the Prime Minister and told him what is going on. And he gladly accepted the offer. And Gadsby got back to me and told me that, yes, he's willing to accept the offer to come to deliver the commencement address for the 1974 graduates.
Wow.
And so an official letter was sent to him from the president of the university. But the letter was sent to him, and after a while, the president called me and said, Dr. Douglas, we haven't heard from the prime minister. Could you follow up on that? So I was surprised when I followed up. I called Elder Gadsby, and Elder Gadsby said to me, I thought he had responded. I said, no, we have not heard from him. So he rushed to his office. I remember that distinctly when he told me the story. He went to Dr. Williams' office and said, listen, Andrews University has sent you a letter inviting you to receive an honorary degree and to give the commencement address. And he said, I never got that letter. What? So he searched, and then the letter was under a pile of paper.
Okay.
Under a pile of paper. And so he said, he looked at the date. And when he saw the date for the commencement was gone. You know, it was gone. It was in May of 1974.
Yes.
So
yes.
he told Elder Gadsby to apologize, which he did. And so I went to the president and I said, you know, unfortunately, the prime minister he got a letter, but he didn't see it at the time. So what happened? The president of the university said, well, what can we do about this? He said, well, here's my suggestion. We are going to be dedicating the science complex in September to celebrate 1974, the founding of Andrews University. Andrews University, which was Battle Creek College, was founded in 1874.
Okay.
So that was the 100th anniversary for the establishment of Andrews University. So he said, well, you know, you're thinking, I said, let me try again. So I called Elder Gadsby and said, Elder Gadsby, this is what we're thinking. Could you get the prime minister to come to give the dedication address for the dedication of the science complex? And he checked him. I said, oh, yes, we'll be happy to come. So I got the word back from him, and immediately we sent the information to the president, the university president, and he said, okay, all arrangements will be made to have him on campus for that occasion. So that's how the process worked out.
Oh, wow. So the original plan was to come for graduation.
For graduation and to get his honorary degree.
Yes.
Commencement address. But when that didn't work out, then we switched to the dedication, which was, in fact, a better occasion for you know? Yes.
Yes, and that happened October, from what I see here, October 27th.
1974.
1974.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So yeah, that's one of the things I read is that, well, first of all, Elder Gadsby's, I believe, granddaughter.
Yes.
Now the Minister of Education in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
So that's part of his legacy there too.
That's right. Yes. He and Elder Gadsby are really good friends.
Yes.
And if I could say this, maybe this will come up later on. We can talk about it again. But the Prime Minister developed a great appreciation for the work of Caribbean Union College, what we are doing. And I would say, without trying to be political, he was a very close friend of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Trinidad and Tobago. Let me put it that way.
Yeah.
He was a close friend of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. In fact, he was accused by some of his opposition people of favoring the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Yes. So, because again, from what I've read in Elder Gadsby's, I believe in his obit,
yes,
is that he helped to fashion the work week so that it avoided and catered to persons who could not work on Saturday.
That's absolutely correct.
Yes, the government.
That's why he was being accused. Could let me add a couple of things in conjunction with that, you see, because one of his advisors, was the academic dean, Dr. William Osborne, who was academic dean at CUC, who had a PhD in economics, and he and Dr. Eric Williams and Dr. Charlie Simmons, who also had a PhD, not at that time, but he had a master's degree in history and economics. They were good friends. And in fact, he tried to get, I don't know if you wouldn't know that, but I know this as a fact. He actually tried to get Dr. Osborne to be part of his government.
Yes. Okay.
Oh, yes.
So this
cabinet.
This definitely leads into the other question, which I think is already answered. So the question was, why Andrews University? Of all the universities, was there some unique circumstances that led to William's visit to Andrews? And I think you kind of laid it out there.
Yes, I was always, I'm not the only one, but a number of us young men at CUC at the time, our whole perspective of outlook on life was radically changed through the influence of Dr. Williams.
Wow.
And so, in a sense, I am what I am today because of what Dr. Williams did in my life as a young student at Caribbean Union College.
Caribbean Union College.
Yeah.
All right. So that's the video. That's the clip that we have here. Let me stop sharing. And so we can move on now. Stacy,
Okay.
Next to our last segment, the panel discussion.
Okay, so I am so happy. I'm so happy. I've just been, bubbling with joy here, just listening to that very insightful trip down memory lane. And there is nothing like getting the accounts of people who were actually there. And I must say, I will step aside here to get into my element. I'm so proud to be a Trinidadian. I was trying to hold it down all along, but I just have to say I'm so proud to be a Trinidadian. And at this time, to herald the panel discussion, we have two other students from the history department of the University of the Southern Caribbean, and so much of that is coming out, so much history, and I'm so happy that these students are here. And I just had a moment a while ago to say that I wish so many more of our young people could listen to this and be empowered. At this time, we'll have Kimberly Noel. Kimberly is a second-year history student, and she will be joined by Katoya Tate. Katoya is a fourth-year history student, and Katoya has an emphasis, too, of legal studies. So these two young ladies will help us herald the panel discussion by introducing our panelists and the moderator.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. First, I would like to start by introducing a man that really needs no introduction, Dr. Akil Murray. Dr. Akil Murray is a dedicated historian and educator at the University of the West Indies in St. Augustine, where he completed both his BA and PhD in history. Currently, he coordinates the certificate in the humanities program and teaches across multiple levels in the Faculty of Humanities and Education. His research focuses on Caribbean religious history with interest in African and Indian diaspora studies and gender studies. Beyond academia, Dr. Murray is a former national athlete and a committed social activist, using his voice to inspire and support vulnerable youth. He will be followed by Dr. Isaiah M. Warner. Dr. Isaiah M. Warner is a renowned chemist and mentor whose work has left an indelible mark on both science and education. Retired as a Boyd Professor, the highest rank in the Louisiana State University system, and Philip West Professor Emeritus of the LSU Chemistry, he is also a Howard Hughes Medical Institute Professor. Dr. Warner's research on fluorescence spectroscopy and ionic liquid chemistry, along with his mentorship of STEM students, has made him one of the world's most cited chemists with over 400 publications and numerous prestigious awards. A committed advocate for diversity in STEM, Dr. Warner's impact extends far beyond the lab, inspiring the next generation of scientists and educators. Thank you.
Kimberly.
Yes. Hi. My two panels would be hi, pleasant good afternoon.
Yes, we're
Go
hearing
ahead,
you.
Kimberly.
My two panelists is Carol Boyce Davis and Solving R. Woodruff. So I'll begin with Carol Boyce Davis. She is a chair of the English department at Harvard University and professor of African diaspora lecturers, and a distinguished professor of humane lectures and professor of African Studies and Literatures in English at Cornell University. She authored many books pertaining to Black women, African diaspora, and the Caribbean. She is also a member of the Scientific Committee for UNESCO Updated General History of Africa. She edited the Epistemological Forum on Global Blackness for the recently published African Diaspora Volume. My next panelist will be Swirling R. Woodruff. He is a professor emeritus at Wesley College, Wesley, Massachusetts, prior to joining the Wesley faculty in 1986. Swirling taught at several universities, including Cornell, and Harvard. He authored several books, one of which is The Slave Master of Trinidad, William Hardin Burney, and the 19th Century Atlantic World, that was longlisted on the 2019 OCM Bocas Prize for Caribbean Lecture. Presently, he writes a weekly column for Trinidad Express.
Thank you very much. My name is David Williams, and I'm a professor.
Dr. Williams? Dr. Williams, we have an introduction for you. And so just hold 1 second. We
Okay.
won't just come on. We have to give you due.
Yes, I would like to introduce our moderator, Dr. David R. Williams. He is a Norman Professor of Public Health and Professor of African and African American Studies at Harvard. He is a leading expert on social factors impacting health and is known for creating the Everyday Discrimination Scale, a widely used tool in health research. His work has shed light on how race, socioeconomic status, stress, and religion affect well-being. With over 500 publications, Dr. Williams is one of the world's most influential social scientists and the most cited Black scholar in his field. His global contributions include the first mental health study in sub-Saharan Africa and pioneering research on Black and Caribbean health in the U.S. Dr. Williams has played a major role in raising awareness of health inequities, serving as a scientific advisor to projects like the PBS series on natural causes and guiding national health initiatives on inequality. Having said that, with such an impressive lineup of expertise and dedication to advancing knowledge in their field, we're thrilled to dive into today's discussion. Thank you.
And thank you so very much. And it's truly an honor and privilege to be here and to serve as a moderator for this great panel. What the plan is that we would give each panelist about 5 minutes to make some comments, and then we would have time for a free floating discussion among the panelists, reflecting on what they have heard from others and or elaborating on them. If you have questions for the panelists, please feel free to post them in the chat. And we hope to have a great time having this conversation today. I will go in the order in which panelists were introduced today. And Professor Murray had actually sent me two questions that he would love to address, and I will read the questions for the audience and then let him deal with those questions. And then the other panelists will just call on you in the order in which you were introduced. So the first question is, how did Prime Minister Williams' debate with Dom Basil Matthews increase his popularity as a public intellectual? And then the second one is, how did Dr. Williams counter the anti-Christian label he received as a result of his personal convictions and scholarship? So, Professor Murray, the time is yours.
Thank you, Professor Williams. I do hope to answer those questions after, actually, in the question and answer segment. I'm hoping that I can stay within the time as well as I give my initial remarks on the topic.
Okay.
In reading Williams's convocation speech at Andrews University, I attempted to assess how his views were also reflected in his scholarship from before and after, and also how it was tied into his personal life and his work as a politician. In reading Williams's convocation address at this prestigious institution in 1974, I see a man who was engrossed in the racial tensions that characterized the time that he lived in. Of course, you had the U.S. Civil Rights Movement, you had the Black Power movement in Trinidad, and you had the apartheid regime in South Africa. And why wouldn't he be? He was a leading politician and scholar, but most importantly, he was a man of African descent himself. The visionary scholar and educator that he was, there is no surprise that he used the opportunity to speak on these things with the hope that it will affect change and that the listeners may grow cognizant of the fact that the church and its institutional extensions have by no means been exempt or immune from adding significantly to the past and contemporary social ills of society. In his address, Williams pointed to the grim history of divisive internal wars within Christianity, taking some gloss off heroic Protestant reformers like John Calvin in the process, before pointing to the church's selective unity in the oppression of indigenous peoples and West Africans in the New World. He was sure to make note of the church's attempt to unashamedly market incentives for missionary support in Africa to European capitalists, even if it came at the expense of the lives of Africans. Williams went on to state, as mentioned by his daughter earlier on, blackness in the eyes of the church was equated with sin and evil. African slavery was the foundation of church power in the New World. Throughout his address, he revealed evidence that found the church guilty of the dehumanization of the Black man in different parts of the globe at different times. As a scholar, it was common for Williams to not shy away from incriminating the church when it came to matters of slavery, colonization, and racism. In his seminal work, Capitalism and Slavery, published 30 years earlier, Williams opposed previously established claims that it was the humanitarian Christians that brought the inhumane system of slavery to an end. Williams labeled such an argument as propaganda. In his work, History of the People of Trinidad and Tobago, published 12 years before this address, Williams explained at length how the churches were complicit in racially dividing the two major racial groups in Trinidad. He documented activities of Anglican Reverend R.H. Moore, who had a history of segregating education in different areas of the country. Williams made reference to Moore's establishment of an Anglican school in Belmont for Creole children in 1888, before he then endeavored to establish a separate school in Belmont for some 30 or 40 children of Indian laborers. Williams quoted Moore, and I quote, "In my mission report of 1877 to 1888, I gave it as my emphatic opinion, and this opinion is being strengthened every day, that a mixed school, i.e. for Creoles and Indians, will be a mistake." To Williams, this racial divisiveness perpetuated by the church fell in line with the attitudes of the government of the day, who in 1890 prescribed separate latrine accommodations for Negroes and Indians on the sugar plantations. Very early on in his address, Williams boasted of the harmonious relationship between the Seventh-day Adventist Church and the Trinbagonian Society. I get the sense that this was Williams' diplomatic side speaking. We've already established as a scholar, Williams was heavily critical of the church. In his private life and as a politician, one could argue that it was the same. Being born into a Catholic family, Williams noted in the 1969 publication of his autobiography, Inward Hunger, that his parents did not practice birth control, tenet of the church. This undoubtedly deeply affected his family's socioeconomic status, and Williams, as the first of 12 children, had a burden of responsibility and expectation thrust upon him. Again, Williams would have another unsavory experience with religion after he successfully completed his college exhibition examination, which earned him a spot at the Queen's Royal College, which was the school that he wanted to attend. Unfortunately, the family priest who believed he was going to the Catholic version, the Catholic school, the CIC, called to congratulate him, but threatened to excommunicate his family from the church upon hearing the news. The issue of birth control and the role of the church in education would go on to be issues he would tackle in his political career. The former consequently led to Williams' political party, the People's National Movement, being given the derisive title of prenatal murderers by political opponents. However, in the book The Elusive Eric Williams, Professor Ken Boudou highlighted a separation of Williams' views on birth control from the politics of his party. According to Boudou, the party's manifesto for the general elections of 1956 did not reflect Williams's often combative position on the church as it related to birth control. The relation between religion and education would become a recurring issue that he would address as a politician, and an issue that some scholars argued ushered in his life as a public intellectual through his famous debate with his contemporary, John Basil Matthews.
Professor Murray, 5 minutes is
Yes.
up, but I'll give you a
All
minute.
right. I'm getting close to wrapping up here.
No problem.
Thank you. In the history of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, Williams highlighted the furor of the Catholic Church after Queen's Collegiate School, which of course was the earlier name for the Queen's Royal College, was established by the colonial government in 1859. This was the same furor that he faced decades later at the hands of the local priests. For this school, the Board of Council passed a resolution that stated that such collegiate school be open to students of any religious denomination, and that there be no direct religious teaching, but that attendance at some place of worship be the condition of admittance to and continue at such a collegiate school. The Catholic Church petitioned the Queen and refused to send their children to the school for what they saw as a godless education. Lastly, it is amazing that so much of the work that Williams published on religion and education played out in similar ways over the course of his political career. As a legislative council, in the face of opposition from the Catholic Church, sought to establish schools with a more secular agenda to accommodate the multi-religious society that they have created. Williams faced the same religious backlash for doing the same with the multi-religious nation that he had inherited a century later. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so very much. And now I'll turn to Professor Warner for your 5 minutes of an introductory comments.
Thank you very much. I'm very appreciative to be here and give a short presentation. And reflecting on today's topic, I decided to talk about my time in Louisiana. As many of you know, Louisiana is a state that's heavily Catholic, also, as in many of the areas that we're talking about. And I grew up in segregated Louisiana during a time when schools were very much segregated. I had a visitor from South America who was a parent of one of my students, and he was shocked that I went to completely segregated schools throughout my entire academic career until graduate school. And I asked him why was he shocked about this, since he knew
that segregation existed in the United States? He said, yes, but I thought it was 100 years ago. No, it is indeed, it was in my lifetime. In fact, you've been hearing about the accolades that I have accomplished at Louisiana State University. My first time setting foot on Louisiana State University was as during my interview for the distinguished professorship that I held there. And in fact, the chair of the department, who was my escort, said, I'll bet Louisiana State University has changed considerably since you were a child. I say, to be perfectly frank, this is my first time ever setting foot on this campus. And having said that, I thought I had really ruined my complete interview, but they searched far and wide, and there was no doubt in my mind that my credentials were as good as any, and they decided that I was to be the distinguished professor of chemistry there. And growing up in Louisiana, both my wife and I, when we left Louisiana for the first time in our life, we had to participate in a segregated society. Can you imagine that? Adults who had never really participated in a segregated society, suddenly you're thrust into an integrated, had to participate in an integrated society, and had never before in our lives been around. We ended up in a community where we were the only Blacks, and we had to participate in that community while working in a very much integrated environment. So that was very much culture shock for us, as I imagine that was the case for Professor and distinguished Professor Williams. And we learned to survive. We learned to survive through our own initiatives, through our own will, and not only survive, but in fact, we excel. And I worked in that industry for about 5 years before I went on to get my PhD, graduating from the University of Washington at the top of my class in chemistry. The only Black graduating in that class. And I am pleased to be a participant in this activity because, as you can tell, I've overcome several obstacles that have allowed me to be the person that I am, to appreciate my Blackness, to appreciate my history, to appreciate the history of your distinguished university. I thank you for your time, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may ask.
Thank you so much, Professor Warner. And next, I'll turn to Professor Carol Boyce Davies.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for this invitation. I have listened really well to the speakers, and it's amazing to learn so much, both positively and negatively, about how the institutional racism still works. So my response to reading this amazing essay by Williams, this address, is titled "The Basis of That Ever-Lingering Fascist Threat." The basis of that ever-lingering fascist threat. And I'm using it deliberately because the discussion about what is fascistic is really part of current election narratives in the United States. So I was always taken by Aimé Césaire's bold assertion in Discourse on Colonialism, 1955, that Nazism and indeed fascism was and is central to European colonial projects. And in his words, that it, quote, oozes, seeps, and trickles from every crack. That is indeed the final product of Western civilization, which has held a primary view of those who are indigenous or African as not therefore human, has been the dominant narrative running through European philosophical thought. In Sylvia Wynter's terms, the European man has held himself as the normative and defined everyone else outside of the definitions of humanity that he had generated for him by himself. Further, according to Césaire, several primary European philosophers and thinkers have historically voiced these positions. Once I read Williams's essay, Religion, Science, University, and Racism, presented as convocation addresses in Andrews in 1974, I found a lot of coherence with what Césaire and the others had talked about earlier. First of all, the date, and Akil mentions this really well. The context is significant. This is 1974. In 1970, a Black Power movement in Trinidad had led to a high degree of activism as Black youth were no longer willing to accept the residual colonial domination and its business and cultural linkages demanded, therefore, social change from Williams, then Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, who had indeed led the country to independence a decade earlier. Now, this would occur several places simultaneously. A recognition that political independence had not really changed existing dynamics in which racialization remains still, and that these factors are still part of the neo-colonial existence. And this would happen to Nkrumah and many of the other African leaders of the same time who had moved their countries to independence. In other words, nothing much changed except the physical representation, the flags, and so on. So here is Williams then, 4 years later, talking definitively about how science, religion, and racism are linked in a university that had a religious orientation. And I found that fascinating listening to all the prior discussions about how there still lingered and still lingers questions of racism, even in these institutions that are defined as religious oriented. But why, right? For Williams, that whole decisive split that many neo-colonial leaders experience between knowing and implementing the transformative processes they intended were really loaded by a history that they were still trying to move and they had a hard time moving. I found it fascinating too that the essay begins with Fanon's Wretches of the Earth 1961 and also references Black Skin, White Masks, the latter, of course, which had addressed the psychopathology of racism as infecting both the Black and white subject. The excerpt Williams cites, can the white man behave healthily towards a Black man and the Black man behave healthily towards a white man, remains an enduring and even contemporary issue. Indeed, it is one very much alive as we speak, leading up to the American elections and the completely polarized support for a possible fascist future. I'm pausing to say at least half of the United States supports a fascist future, okay? But beyond this clearly dominant issue of racism, the hidden issue of gender, for me, remains still a dominant, unspoken, even though it's experienced in an ongoing kind of way, and actually sometimes very vocally now spoken as the attacks on the woman who is running for president has received them. So what I found fascinating, though, was how Williams went to make these points in this particular presentation to what has been defined as the Black or Caribbean radical intellectual tradition, meaning that tradition of analysis which looks at the Black experience in a global context, which requires a kind of global interconnected solution with a parallel determination to analyze all of these. Interestingly, Williams describes himself still as a student, particularly concerned at the moment with the New World experience of race relations. But here he is in a kind of Frederick Douglass-like flourish, apologizing in advance as he launches a critique into the church and religion in a really deliberate way. Quote, the Christian church divided against itself was united, may I dare say, ecumenical in its attitude to the people of different race and color and with whom it made contact, especially the Amerindians and the West Africans.
President Davies, I'll give you 1 minute to wrap up.
Wonderful. It was struck by their color, their strange customs. So Williams proceeds then, and I just want to summarize a few points that I see him making. To the white European, Blackness connoted inferiority. The church was always heavily involved in the slavery project. World Christianity, fortifying itself with dubious references from the Old Testament, equated blackness and black and slave. Slavery had been sanctioned and legitimized by the classical societies of Greece and Rome. British philosophers like David Hume and Thomas Carlyle condoned slavery consistently. The church has a long hostility to knowledge. European classification systems put themselves at the top and also identified others always as subordinate. European citizenship was linked to masculinity, as does leadership today. Famous liberators like Lincoln wanted to resettle Black people in Central America. The statement that it would take 300 years of civilization for Black people to catch up is dominant. So I see all sorts of echoes with people like Martin Luther King Jr. with current discourses of reparations, and I'm very critical of the way he ends with that Fanonian reference to reparations, which hopefully in the question and answer period people can raise. But I think it's because he was not yet, and he was operating in an earlier time in which the Fanonian argument was that we have a moral response not to accept, reparative justice from them. But that has changed considerably in more recent redefinitions of what reparative justice means. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Next is Professor Selwyn Kudrow. You have your 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I first of all wanted to thank Dr. Murray and the school for inviting me to participate in this marvelous discussion. I was very intrigued by Erica's encyclopedic presentation, and even more intrigued by Carol's end of the paper when she talks about Eric Williams's dubious notion of reparations, when I think quotes Césaire to support that position. However, I think what we've done, and we always do it that way, we speak of the international dimensions of the problem. It's important to point out that when Eric Williams gave that speech, he was in a big controversy with all of the different major religions in Trinidad about the question of freedom. On August 7, 1974, 7 religious organizations, Calvin Abdullah, the bishop of the Anglican Church, Pantin, Rock, Lida, Gopal, and all those religions took a very strong view of the nature of the question of education. And of course, someone talked about the closeness of Dr. Williams to the Seventh-day Adventists. But of course, that too was a basis of discussion. I just want to read again from that just a very small piece, and I'll get into my other points. In terms of that same August, there's a very big article, a big statement by the 5 religious leaders of these churches, which said the Archbishop, for example, had sent a letter. Those 4 organizations, or 6 organizations, had sent a letter to Williams to talk about the question of ecumenism. And this is Clive Pantin speaking a bit about it. He said, "It is true that the Penny made a statement on education during the month of August, in which he referred to our letter, but I would like to make 2 comments. When the heads of religious denominations sent a joint communications to the PM, the most elementary courtesy requires that some acknowledgements be made. He never responded to them. Then secondly, he says, the statement made by the PM at a convention of Seventh-day Adventists, a demonstration which was officially repudiated, a demonstration, a community who had officially repudiated ecumenical activity, which of course he said was their right, but of course was the sense of certainly not speaking with and having that communications. So is that against that background that he accepts that invitation to come up to speak at Andrews University? Now, the thing that struck me about that speech, first of all, is that, of course, it is not so much about a building as we all perhaps understand now. It was really the integration of religion, science, and racism, and how they really integrated with one another to create an order of defamation against Black people and what they were supposed to be doing. Now, some other people have spoken about the question he raised about, I think everybody spoke about it, when he talked about the fact that the white Europeans, Blackness connoted inferiority, the Portuguese, et cetera, talk about the fact that Blackness was seen as a mark of difference. He also spoke about the fact that African slavery was the foundation of church power in the New World. And he goes on to make quite a number of points. I even suggest that slavery had been sanctioned and legitimized by the classical societies of Greece and Rome, which I think Carol just spoke about. But of course, what I found was intriguing about that Williams speech, apart from the integration of all of those elements, was the way in which a sitting prime minister, which I always admire him, of course, kept at the scholarship. He kept at the scholarship in a way that I think Carol just spoke about. He began his speech, of course, certainly with Fanon, of course, a guy wretched of the earth, and he goes on to black skins, white mass, etc. Then he goes on to cite a number of people who in fact came together both psychologically, philosophically, and otherwise to talk about the kind of putting Black folks in their place and their systematic way of keeping Black people down. So I was first of all intrigued by the notion that here we are in terms of Williams using these most contemporary references in terms of dealing with the scholarship, which meant he was always on top of the scholarship. The second thing I find very importantly, he speaks, for example, of Linnaeus, and the question of Linnaeus being the guy who talked about all these categorizations of phylum and phylosis and so on, and botany, as being almost the father of racism. I find it intriguing because I'm looking here at Jason Roberts' book, Everything, Living Thing, The Great and Deadly Race, etc. And in point of fact, Williams is recognizing in his piece as early as 1974 that the father of racism, I won't go into the quote here, but he recognizes also that at the base, that Linnaeus was at the basis of this racial dichotomy which has come down. I thought it rather intriguing. The third thing I found important in terms of my own work was his talking about what happened at Trinidad College, when you had the whole thing of Rose Must Fall, and of course the tremendous way in which he spoke about the way in which the church itself, the Anglican Church, Trinidad College, how they, of course, was so primary, of course, in keeping Black folks down, and even in terms of the curriculum, and how they even scarred the society on the brows and so on of these students. And of course, that coincides very much with Rhodes Must Fall and what's happening right now at Oxford or has been happening. The other interesting book I thought was interesting in terms of Williams, if he did speak about it, he did speak about the question of these are white
I'll
humanitarians.
give you a minute to wrap up. I will give you 1 minute to wrap up.
I went across 5 already?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. 1 minute, right. Only the last thing I would say, for example, in fact, I would have liked to be acknowledged the work of people like Lorenzo da Silva Mendonca and the Black Atlantic Abolitionist Movement, who in 1684 had gone to the Vatican and to talk about not only the liberation and abolition of slavery, but to talk about reparations. And that was very fine. This book just came out. And the truth of it is that Williams, he didn't see that, which of course led to the last position when he quotes Fanon on the question of being human, and didn't so concern himself with the question of reparations. So I think the book, for example, or his speech was eminently, as you know, scholarly. Secondly, it brought together those 3 interrelated issues of racism, of course, racism, science, and of course, religion as the foundation. And of course, went on to speak, who said was great fun, I think, his autobiography, a guy like Césaire and others, talking about that at the rendezvous of victory, but more importantly, the sense of this humanity. And of course, the sum of questions of reparations and those things don't count. So I thought that the piece itself, to me, was very illuminating, and I was very appreciative of the things he did. I always want to emphasize that there was a local context. When we speak of the broad context, it came out of the specificity of a big fight that was going on there at the time in terms of religion, and in terms of the concordat, and in terms of how religion falls into the whole question of education. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Audience, you've had a wonderful insights that have been brought up. I have a few comments to make as well. And it has to do, when I read, thanks Desmond for organizing this and for sending me Dr. Eric Williams' speech. When I read it, there were 2 things that struck me. He said the Christian church, divided against itself, was united in its attitude towards people of a different race and color. And he also said religion and science saw eye to eye and stood shoulder to shoulder where Blackness and Africans were concerned. He highlighted what is not widely recognized, that in the United States, there is a strong relationship between religion and prejudice. And I want to illustrate that with the current political environment. The Pew Charitable Organization did do a national public opinion poll, and one conducted the last week of August, first week of September, found that 82% of white evangelical Protestants support Donald Trump. 61% of white Catholics, 58% of white non-evangelical Protestants support Donald Trump, where he stands in opposition to everything their religious beliefs they claim to stand for. This is not new. There was a book published in 1973 that reviewed 2 decades of research on religion and prejudice. The book was entitled The Bias and the Pious. And it showed that white people in the United States, the more religious they were, on average, the more racially prejudiced. The more frequently they attended church, the more prejudice. The greater their orthodox religious beliefs, the greater prejudice. For example, those who believed in the inspiration of the Bible were more prejudiced than those who didn't. Those who believed in the virgin birth were more prejudiced than those who didn't. And there is a body of research from the social sciences published since 2018 that shows one of the biggest drivers of support for Donald Trump in the United States is racial prejudice. One study found that after adjusting for a broad range of factors, white people who agreed with the statement that they were afraid of people of other races were 10 times more likely to have voted for Trump in the 2016 election. Another study found that as adults moved from acknowledging racism to denying racism, there was a 60% point increase in support for Donald Trump. Another study found that among whites, Trump had, in 2016, a 4-point margin of support over Hillary Clinton among college graduates, but nearly a 40% margin among those without a college education. And what explained that difference? What accounted for that difference in analyses? It was their racism accounted for the difference between the by education level. Another study found that simply reminding white Americans who scored high on a measure of racial identification that whites would become a minority of the population in 2042 led them to increase their support for candidate Donald Trump. Another study found that the whites who support Trump are more socially isolated from minorities than other Americans. And so the racial isolation measured at the zip code level, how many neighbors you have of a different race, was a strong predictor if you were more isolated from other racial groups in terms of support for Donald Trump. So it's a striking pattern, but somewhat puzzling. But Eric Williams put his fingers on it, the extent to which Christians who nonetheless have this very strong relationship with racial prejudice, which flies against many Christian values, and that a strong racism is what is driving the support for Donald Trump in the contemporary elections. So I've thrown out another issue that we can think about, the insights that we can get from Eric. It's in Eric Williams' point. I was struck how strong it came through there. And I want to open now to the panelists to comment. You have time now to comment on anything any other panelist said. And I would say to the audience, if you have questions, you could post them in the chat, and I will bring them up for the panelists.
Yes.
I want to thank the moderator for that position. It would be nice if he would post some of those examples in the chat so we can follow them, because he gave a lot of proof from the current narrative. So please do when you have a chance.
I totally agree with that. I happen to be in one of those communities you're talking about where I'm the only, well, there are 2 Blacks in this community. I'm on one end, the other Black family is on the other end of this particular community. And recently, one of my neighbors that I thought was very favorably disposed toward me put up a sign for Trump. And I had no intention of putting up a sign, but no other sign appeared in my neighborhood. Therefore, I put up a sign for Kamala Harris and Wallace directly across the street from his sign. And so I wanted to be very vocal in that respect to where I stand on this entire issue. There is absolutely no doubt that Donald Trump is a racist, and that if he is elected, we will be in a sad situation in this country.
You are so right. Anyone else? I mean, one of the things I could do, if the Desmond, if you make me a co-host so I can share my screen.
Okay, I will.
I can show quickly the slides that that I was drawing on.
Okay. You are a co-host.
Okay. But in the meantime, I see Erica hand is up.
There is a question or statement from Erica, basically to Selwyn. She says, Selwyn, I'm not clear on the economical issue in TNT in 1974. And she goes on to say some other things. So do you want to explain some more? She said, because the concordat between the government and various churches with respect to education was signed in 1960 and worked reasonably well.
I was simply reading from the Express. I went to the archives on Saturday, looked up at the discourse and the debate that was taking place. There's a major statement on the Express of two pages by the 6 major religions, taking great exception to Williams's position, writing about it, and I think that's where the information is. There's also other essays, other articles, but I quoted from an article by Pantin and others who were very, and of course, Williams never even responded to their questions. And then 3 or 4 days, there was a conference of 3 conferences at, in fact, Chaguaramas Convention Center, and they commented. I think the 4 organizations plus tap in someone else says these meetings are a waste of time. I am saying at that time there was a conflict between the Seventh-day Adventists, which, as the gentleman says, favored Williams and whom he favored, and the other 6 groups of which the Seventh-day Adventists was not a part. They were not a part because they said they did not believe in ecumenism. And the statements are there. I don't want to take this, but I read it. I'm just giving the citations. So if Erica, if you go there and you look at those statements, you will see it.
Yeah, this is something that brings a good context to what was going on in Trinidad and what was probably in his mind and his head as he prepared this speech on racism, science, religion, because he was in fact dealing with that.
He was going on to China. It's a big announcement. I have it in my thing.
That was his second trip to China.
China and Japan, and said, and he came in on to come to speak at your place. So it's part of a larger. In fact, that's why I'm always concerned about the great economical and the large worldly. But it seems to me part of the knowledge is to localize the phenomenon. Then you could think outside the box. Something is important. And of course, your speaker, who said he invited him, said he favored, he said he had close ranks with his Adventist, with your interview. He said that. And they were kind of jealous, and they weren't enemies. These were 6 organizations who had a difference in terms of interpretation. So it's not a question. I'm just saying that I try to be specific. How does this speech come about? And what are the local precedents for it? And then we could go on to the larger. You go from the particular to the general.
And the thing is,
we do not do the lot when we talk about Caribbean issues. Somehow we go to the larger world issues. That's fine. It seems to me, but all our scholars, be it James, we all talk about what's happening outside. And this was in terms of Trinidad, Tobago, the intellectual climate, the religious climate. It's always the source. I think you put us for that question about Don Basil Matthews and all that kind of good stuff. In other words, I think all I tried to do, and I did a much longer paper on that, in terms of the local origins, and of course the paper announces on the 15th that Dr. Williams is going to go to so-and-so, and I have it right here, to give this convocation address. It was mentioned in the Trinidad Express.
Okay, excuse
Thank
me.
you. Professor Murray, Professor Murray's hand is up, and Stacy, I'll come to you next.
No, I'm just saying that Mrs. Williams-Connell, Erica Williams-Connell, her hand has been up for some time.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. I didn't see her on my screen, but
I'm sorry, I'm technically challenged. Akil, you have to tell me how to put that little yellow palm there.
okay.
You have to do it. So I can
Okay.
only go like this.
Okay.
I just wanted to address a couple of things.
Go,
Selwyn,
go
you
right
said that
ahead.
you made several points about Eric Williams not responding to the letter, but that presupposes that he found it. Remember what Dr. Douglas said? The letter was buried under piles of papers.
No. Come on,
I could
Erica.
show
Let's
you
come on.
I could show you a photograph of
No,
that desk.
I'm not talking about piles. I'm saying the
No,
routine.
I'm not disagreeing with you. There were many times when he chose not to respond to someone. I'm just saying that you can't just assume that he didn't respond because he didn't want
I'm
to.
not assuming that was on the newspapers. It
Well,
was
right,
said
I
3
understand.
times.
I
Did
understand.
not, and whatever the reason was, the empirical evidence is he did not return, and they responded 3 and 4 times. And go and look at the papers. Just don't take my word for it.
Of course I will. And I also wanted to talk to respond to Dr. Williams, where he talked about the sign that you was it?
What?
No, Dr. Warner. Was it Dr.
Dr.
Warner who put up the
Dr.
sign?
Warner, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, Dr. Warner. Yes. You're putting up that the camel sign. I live in Miami, and it is absolutely stunning to me as I drive around. There is not a yard sign in sight, and this is completely. I've been here 51 years. This is completely unusual for during election season, and it just goes to show you the kind of climate of fear of being tagged or whatever the hell it calls it, a troll or whatever it is. I don't know what it is, but this fear, which is astonishing, and I think that's why people, one can only hope that when people go into regardless of what they say publicly, when they go into the ballot box, there's nobody else in there with them, and they will hopefully do the
right thing.
That is what
absolutely sane thing.
That is what Liz Cheney's been saying. But just one thing. This is a statement, October 13, 1974, Statement of Education of Heads of foreign major religious denominations in the Express for 2 pages. And you could go and get the articles around that.
Okay.
Thank you. Professor Murray, I want to go to you.
Yes.
Your hand was up
Yes,
earlier.
yes. Two things I wanted to make mention of. One is, are we giving some focus to eschatology and in terms of American politics in relation to African Americans and, of course, whites as well, seeing the Republican Party as one that is perhaps more pro-Israel in terms of the issues involved in the Middle East and how that is connected to their beliefs of end-time prophecies and things that are or will happen. And so that, to many of them, outweigh the internal issues of racism and other factors. So we have to give some credence to that issue. Also, in relation to Williams and the Concordat and what Professor Kojo would have raised, we have to give some compartmentalization to Williams, the scholar, and Williams, the politician. Williams, the scholar, had his views, as I mentioned when I was sharing earlier on. As a scholar, he did not hesitate to criticize the church. But as a politician, he balanced or he had a good relationship in his politics. And of course, as mentioned earlier, in his social interactions with many religious persons. So the Concordat, the PNM's manifesto in 1956, would have acknowledged the role of the church of religion in education. Yeah? But Williams, as a scholar, leaned towards the state as as one that should be more in charge of education. I think it's important for us to pay attention to that.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen, and so someone asked for the information I shared. I think you're going to see it's too much for me to just post that, but I'm going to quickly. You can see some of the evidence historically I'm not sure why my screen doesn't want to move. Okay, yes. This one just is a 1973 book that established a strong relationship over multiple 3 decades of research on religion and prejudice. And I want to share with you the work on the support for Trump and prejudice. And the point I'm making is most of that research doesn't come from the current election, comes from the 2016 election, showing what predicted support for Trump. What I also illustrated was a Pew study shows that solid research from religious people is still there. And what we know is that the driver of this support for Trump has in fact been religion. The references are at the bottom of the slide, so you can see the journal that I'm citing from. Here is the other study showing a 60% point increase in support from Trump as people move from acknowledging racism to denying racism. So Trump supporters are people who in fact deny racism. You can see that's a 2018 Political Science Quarterly paper. Here is another one. Among whites, Trump had a 4-point margin of voter support over Hillary Clinton. Among college graduates, a 40% margin. Among those without a college degree, racial attitudes and sexism completely accounted for this education gap. So we've seen what the driver is. Here is another study, a 2018 study again, looking at just reminding whites that will become a minority. There's the white replacement theory is a big underlying driver of a lot of where the political right is coming from, that there's a grand conspiracy that's decades old, started by some Jews and others to make whites a minority in the United States. And part of that is reflected in the abortion fight, since white women are the majority of women in America. And so the majority of babies being aborted are white infants, and they see that as part of this bigger conspiracy. So yes, there are people opposed to abortion on religious grounds, but a lot of the opposition to abortion and the laws we are seeing change are driven by the white replacement theory that has been part of a strategy. Here is another 2017 study that Trump supporters have less contact with minorities. So just to give you a sense of some of the data there, posting all of this in the chat would be a big challenge for me, but you can see some of the references at the bottom.
You could give it to me later and I could send it up by
Absolutely.
email. Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of people asking for it.
Okay, let's get some panelists in with further comments. Yes, go ahead, Professor Selwyn.
Yes, it seems to me you've given all of those slides, and I think this, as I try to, I probably didn't have enough time, only 5 minutes. So I don't know what you could say in 5 minutes. But it seems to me the fundamental point that was made by Dr. Williams is that science and religion undergirds racism.
Yes.
It's at the deep center and core of a particular ontological way of looking at the world. It has not disappeared. All you are doing is saying here there's a contemporary evidence that supports that position. That's all. That nothing has changed in that sense. If I know you to be a dog, and in light of civil rights, I must say, no, you're Mr. Dog. I will say, Mr. Dog, but in my deep unconscious, you're still a dog. And so that is at the center of the issue. What I think is important to me about Dr. Williams' position, the way in which he was able to pull all those things together, even though it's a bit empirical. Part of Dr. Williams is a lot of empirical and facts and so on. But when you get to the gist of it and the bottom of it, what he has said, that those are the things which has pushed the world from its inception. And all that science and religion has done, and now, of course, at the universities, but you cannot talk much at Harvard because y'all can't even speak about Israel. And there's even a law where we can talk about Palestine, that all it has done now, it's been given the support of the moneyed class to keep those things going. So your slides are important, but I think at the core of one's ontological being and their epistemological understanding of the world is at the core is racism. And the point is, that is what I think was so brilliant about Williams' piece, even though I didn't accept his last argument about reparations.
So you have
said it well. Go ahead.
Just so you know, Selwyn, that David here has been a target of the right. Okay, he's on a list they would begin their essays and their, newspaper articles with David R. Williams.
I know
So
David R. Williams from Harvard. I
he's
was
the
there when he was there. So I know David and know where he stands in the
oh, okay,
world. I
okay,
know it
yeah.
very
No.
well.
No,
I know
I
where
think
he stands. I think we've even
the,
corresponded. But I'm just
yes.
saying that one of the things, and that's why we have is that at the core, and I didn't think the discussion would take this turn, at the core of they wiped out the Indians. What's your problem? By the president. And Trump had his photograph in the White House. A president in 1837. What is the problem? We know it. I think the sort of counter display by the professor from Louisiana to say at every moment in every day of our lives, we must counter racism because it remains at the heart and marrow of the American society, and more importantly, the Western world. And the great thing about Eric Williams is he had that foresight. He was able to that's why I was pleased. I tell you what I was pleased about. He starts with Fanon. This guy doing all kinds of stuff. He started with Fanon, black skins, white mass, and
Absolutely.
and understand the psychological, because Fanon brings up Lacan, the father of psychotherapy after Freud. And here's Lacan talking about him in his book on black skins, white mass, because they understood the centrality. And Carol brought up the point. So we know that. Our thing is, how do we fight against it? The mismeasure of man. You know that, Mr. Davis. The mismeasure of man by a Harvard professor. Talk about this on the Agassiz Center, still named after that notorious guy who had to measure independent intelligence by the size of one skull. It's still at Harvard. So we know that science and so on have been brought in, and so is religion. So now Trump is the angel of God. Now, how do you do that stuff?
Yeah, and how do you have the paradox is that the racism is nonetheless inconsistent with some of the other religious beliefs these folks have, but it overrides their other religious beliefs that the point you're making, and you've made it very well. I think Carol wanted to say something.
Right, I wanted to say too, we cannot.
I'll bring you in.
I wanted to say it's not just Harvard, Cornell doing the same thing right now with a number of profs and grad students. And I think what's going on, and Williams is saying that, is that the universities are really part of that whole process because they legitimize these horrible racist positions. They have always done that. So we can't, we cannot discount that. And we need to bring back in the fact that he links science, religion, university.
Right. That is the
we are implicated as part of the academy. That's the argument. And how do we push back against that? The extent to which we teach students in a much more progressive way, that we give them different information. And so all of those are factors that many of us have used over the years. But I want to stress that we cannot single out any institution because many of them are implicated. One of the things I wanted to say to, and I had it in my discussion, was that Harvard itself did a 2022 report on its legacy of slavery. And what I found there really blew my mind. And the Caribbeans need to look at this. You can find this report online. Essentially, the Caribbean funded a lot of the endowment of Harvard. Slavery from the Caribbean. Many of the slave masters had holdings in the Caribbean. Go online, look for the Harvard report on slavery, 2022. Chapter 3 will give you that detail.
And Tegan slave master talked about that very well. So we know that. Sorry, I know I didn't mean to just.
Some people know that.
Mr. David was from Harvard. That's what I brought up. That's the only sense in service.
No. That's fine. That's not a problem. So there are two things. One is you're absolutely correct. I served on the Harvard and Slavery Committee. By the way, there's some reports in the Harvard Crimson, the student newspaper, that there's some the committee. It was about a 14-person committee. We had researchers feeding us information, but there's a report from the Harvard Crimson that slavery played an even bigger role than the report.
Oh my God!
Than the report indicates. But the report showed, like, even in a window of time, in the early 19th century, 1/3 of Harvard's donations, which was substantial, came from, I think it was 4 persons who made their money as a result of slavery and the slave trade. But I want to come back to the other issue that Desmond was making about when and what is new, I think, in the United States right now is that there is a concerted, organized attack against any mention of racism, racial discrimination, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's what's new. According to the New York Times, 12 states have passed legislation making anything in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion illegal. 8 other states have it under consideration. Many large U.S. corporations, the New York Times indicated, have shut down their offices on diversity, equity, and inclusion, or dramatically reduce their staff. We are in a brave new world. 2 weeks ago, what Desmond was mentioning, the Washington Post had an article about researchers who do work on racism. I am one of those that was featured in that article, and the right wing has created a watch list. It's called, you can go to it now, Professors Watch List. And it lists the dangerous professors with right-wing ideology who will discriminate against students with conservative views and will be hostile towards students with conservative views. Professors watch list. I am one of 35 Harvard faculty on the list, but I was one of those featured in the Washington Post story about this. So that is what is new. The right-wing organized, and these are all Trump supporters, right-wing organized opposition to anything. And by the way, Christopher Rufo, you may have never heard of his name, but he's one of the organizers. He is having a tour in Canada. There was a newspaper article about it, and it's being funded by many large U.S. corporations. He's sharing this opposition to DEI and opposition to racism and discrimination, and who is funding his lecture tour in Canada is many large corporations like Coca-Cola, for example, was one of those I remember. But 5 large corporations are funding it. So this is what's new in the U.S. now.
And it's here on our campus, unfortunately, where we've seen the Office of Diversity basically slashed, gone here on campus, which is very ironic, while the diversity of Andrews is increasing, that's the time they choose to cut back, to slash, to remove the Office of Diversity. Makes no sense.
We have talked a lot.
If I could, may I add one more comment?
Yes, please.
I talked about the state of Louisiana and how I ended up at LSU. When I arrived, LSU had never produced more than 3 African-American PhDs in chemistry in its 150-year history. Okay, I was there for about 35 years. With my coming to LSU and trying to change the environment, LSU now leads the nation in the number of African-American PhDs in chemistry. We have produced more than 100 PhDs. 3 before I came. Since I came, we have produced more than 100 African-American PhDs. Only about 10 of those came out of my group. So we should all work toward changing the climate wherever we are. And I know that all of you are based on what you're saying, but we should continue to work on trying to change the climate, regardless of who's president, regardless of what hate groups try to attack us. We cannot forget our mission that we owe it to our ancestors to make the world better for our children as they go out in this world.
You said it eloquently. We cannot be deterred. Too many have given their lives to open the doors that we have walked through, and we owe it to them and their memory and their sacrifice to continue to struggle and not be deterred by those who are trying to dismantle the progress that has been made. I agree with you 100%.
Is that rate still going on at LSU? Is that you left?
It's interesting that you asked that question. Okay. After I left, the rate is beginning to drop. Not only because of my leaving, but also because a number of other universities have taken on the call. So I can mention the University of Michigan, University of North Carolina, So there's competition where there wasn't competition before.
Okay.
That's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So are there any questions in the chat? We could probably, what do you think, David? Maybe 5 more minutes?
Another 5 minutes if folks would
Ready?
like to talk some more. This has been rich. Thanks so much, each one of you, for your insights.
Yeah.
And thanks to Dr. Eric Williams, and thanks, Desmond, to you for your vision in creating this opportunity where we can reflect on it. I had never read his speech.
Yeah, I don't think it's published. I don't think it's published. So I got it from UWI St. Augustine, and there was resistance to giving it to me. And so I contacted Erica, and that's the reason why we have it.
I'm just wondering, this is just a suggestion, and because some journals do this, online journals, they would publish a piece like that and the responses. And I think this would be a good way to probably take it forward so that there's more
Okay.
discussion of it.
Yeah,
And
let's
I think
talk to
people,
Erica.
those of us who presented already had prepared text short, which would
Yes.
be what
So,
should
yeah.
do in a case like this. But I would recommend that as an option.
Okay, I'll follow up with Erica and we talk about it and get it out. I'm pretty sure she would be very supportive.
Right. It should
Yeah.
circulate. And
Yeah.
the responses as well,
Yes.
including David Williams' Erica's as well. So.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Anybody in the audience that has a statement?
Any final burning comment or
Yes.
question? We don't have all of these distinguished panelists every day.
Exactly, exactly. I don't see any
Well,
hands.
Desmond, I'm not seeing any. Let me hand over to you. Thank you for organizing this. This has been a really intellectually refreshing 2 hours that we have spent here. Plus reflecting on a great leader from our region. I should let Eric Williams' daughter know that I apologize that when I was in 1974, I was a student in Maracas Valley, a student from St. Lucia studying in Trinidad at Caribbean Union College, now University of the Southern Caribbean. And I would like to tease my Trinidadian friends and always tell them my last name is Williams. I'll tell them, you know my Uncle Eric, right? I used to refer to him as my Uncle Eric.
We do have a Dr. Arthur.
Yes, I couldn't resist the invitation, so thank you very much. I wonder, Mr. Arthur used to be at Andrews, not someplace else. I do wonder, Dr. Williams and the other speakers, as we wrap up, what gives you hope? You look into the future, you look where churches are going, maybe even where we're going politically. What gives you hope?
What gives you hope?
I can say one thing. I think that I pray to God that Kamala Harris wins the election. But if she doesn't, I think 4 more years of Donald Trump will bring America to its sense and realize what this man is, because half this country they don't realize what this man is. And I think his election would make them realize it. So that's the only consolation I get about the possibility that he might win. I pray to God he doesn't. If he wins, they will recognize.
In terms of what gives hope, I wanted to commend Dr. Warner. First, his experience personally, that he strived in the context that he grew up and the opportunities he had, and then he went on to give other young people that opportunity. And I want to commend you, even though now you're retired, but I'm sure there are many young people that you've helped to achieve in history and who are carrying on the torch.
There are some great young people coming behind me. There's a young woman named Bria Manuel, Dr. Bria Manuel. She's postdoc in University of Maryland, Baltimore County. She is going to be wonderful, but I can name several dozen other people that are coming behind that are going to do things. And that's all that we can ask, is that we leave some people behind when we're gone that will carry on the fight.
Yep, that's right.
I would say two things in response to the question that give me hope. One is my students. I have students and postdoctoral fellows who've trained with me who are out there, making a huge difference, and who are less patient than I am.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's one, and the other, it's philosophical, but also a spiritual point. Martin Luther King said the arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I believe that justice is going to prevail eventually, and I'm not sure how we're going to get there, what the steps are going to be, but that is another guiding principle for me. The arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Donald Trump can only do so much. There are larger forces in the universe.
Yes.
Not just Donald Trump. The fact of the matter is that about half of the population believe and have embraced his racist philosophy.
Yes, I agree. Yes.
That is the core.
Yes.
If he wins, I very likely racism pursuit. What does it mean for America? That is the point. That's where Carroll started as a fascist state. What we have to understand, the implications of fascism for all of our lives. It's not that you put out one good student, I put another good student. We are faced with a monumental challenge, which a guy says from inception, you're going to be a dictator.
Yes.
That admires all the right-wing figures in the world. So it's not just simply hope, it's to understand. Because I remember when I think was this guy, McGovern got 3 states. How many states McGovern got when he fought? I know who got McGovern fought. He got 3 states. And we had to build from there. And so what I think we have to accept, we don't have to accept it. The reality is that a half of the population, not just like, they don't put it in just Trump. They believe it.
They believe it.
Yes.
It's fundamental. And the point that we're trying to say they should not, because we're in the East Coast and whatever coast, that they fundamental. It just simply means, I think, our work continues each day and each night, wherever we are, because the world is a changing. And it must be really a really negative. When they put out how much this guy going to go into 20-something states to talk about you in Canada, founded by Coca-Cola. It's not just, that's a serious thing.
Yes.
So I see Bridget hand is up.
Bridget, Len Archer, and then Bridget. Len's hand up first, and then have Bridget next.
Thank you very much. Now, this is such an interesting discussion this evening. I wish we had more time, and I have to run myself. But yeah, just a few interesting comments. I live in this sort of a dual world myself. Being a citizen of the United States, really live in Florida, but currently in Trinidad, and I was one of those who attempted to do the overseas voting. I registered, and David, believe me, I have not received my vote, my ballot.
One.
So I also know that Florida is making a desperate attempt to purge the rolls, and one way to eliminate some of us is those of us who are members of the diaspora who are not currently in the country. Might be a reason. I don't know what it is, but I'm really disappointed. And of course, the fact that Florida, led by a Republican who is sort of attempting to be a mini-me of Trump, and some of the policies mentioned earlier on in terms of eliminating literature and changing the structure of the schools. Right now, I think there's a ballot in Florida to make school corporation representatives political rather than non-partisan, attendee. So there are all these things that seriously of serious concern to a lot of us. And so, David, I know I didn't realize that you were one of the chosen few.
Yep.
But
It's not few. There are hundreds, if not thousands of people.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm using the phrase
Yeah, it's a lot of us.
in a sort of a theological context.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And,
then you might have to come to the US to vote.
well, yeah,
Take a
unfortunately, I
take a weekend
can't.
off.
But you know, David, when you mention that, it's probably not only you, not only some of the prominent ones. Sometimes I make comments on articles, you know, when I see them and post and read, and I often wonder myself, am I being looked at, chosen, selected for some sort of a retribution? Because it seems like that's the way these guys want to go. Anyone who doesn't agree becomes an enemy.
Yes.
You have to agree with everything that's said. You
enemy-
can't have a second. You can't have another opinion. A divergent opinion means that you're an enemy of, and that makes it very dangerous.
Yeah, the enemy within.
Mm-hmm.
That's his
Thank you.
phrase.
Let's go to Bridget.
Thank you so much. It is amazing the confluence of numbers when you think of the 150th anniversary of Andrews University, couching this 50th anniversary, as it were, of the address of Dr. Eric Williams at Andrews University. I had no idea that he'd been there. So 50 years ago, 1974, when he was at Andrews University, the year is now 2024. In 1977, Dr. Eric Williams, I had the distinct honor of introducing him on the campus when he addressed the graduation class, my graduation class, 1977 at USC.
Yep.
And in 3 years from now, we will be celebrating the centennial of USC. I would humbly suggest that this forum be replicated in some format for the centennial celebration at USC to show the confluence of the touring of someone as unifying as Dr. Eric Williams. Of course, David Williams plans to be there at the centennial, and all of you should plan to be there, including Dr. Hartwell Murray. The question by Dr. Kristen Arthur is most relevant.
Yeah.
What is left? Is there hope? And I say a resounding yes, because if a 15-year-old girl could travel from Guyana to Trinidad in 1974 and be here at this forum in 2024 with her daughter, there is hope, because we're passing the baton. We are passing the baton. It is in fora like these where you have a David Williams and other Murray and all the Murrays and a Warner together making these statements that we pass the history. There are things that I learned today that I did not know, because you guys are here assembled and speaking the truth. And I say, Dr. Murray, you know that we meet in other fora, that we record these facts. My daughter said, well, Mom, where is it written? I said, there's nowhere yet. Dr. Murray is working as a one-man pilgrimage to write our histories down. And I respectfully suggest, Dr. Murray, that we have this written, that we have the transcript in some kind of historic record, and that we pass it on. There is hope, Dr. Arthur. If your young Dr. Kristen Arthur could hear these stories, we are a people of oral history. We can translate our oral histories as we meet together into written record, and therefore inspire our young. So I pray God for everyone who needs to travel. My ballot has not got to me. I had to speak to them. So I'm going to be driving to Berrien Springs because I want to vote Michigan. So pray for my car, pray for my trip. I intend to vote by God's grace. Let us keep this going. There is hope, Dr. Arthur. Thank you, doctors, everyone on the call. Today was important. Thank you so much.
So
All right.
a couple of
Before I
things.
hand over to Desmond, let me just say a big thank you to all of the panelists, Professor Murray, Professor Selwyn Cujo, Professor Isaiah Warner, Professor Carol Boyce Davies. All of you were just fantastic. We just didn't have the time we needed to deserve to this, but thank you so much. And thank you, Desmond, for your vision in pulling us all together and doing this well. I hand over to you, Desmond.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll hand over to my MC, Mistress of Ceremonies, Stacy.
Thank you. It was an honor to be in the presence of such depth of intellect. I don't know that could be said anymore. We do want to say thank you for the audience that has been here and stayed, and it's a combination of university presidents, other administrators, lecturers, students, professionals from other spheres, even laymen. I want to thank you guys for allowing the students to participate, the ones who introduced. This was a great opportunity for them to kind of rub shoulders, so to speak, with the intellect and also get rid of some of their nerves and that kind of thing. We want to say thank you for the people who were directly connected with Dr. Williams in some way, his daughter, those who, the minister from Trinidad and Tobago, the representative from UWI, that is Dr. Maury, Dr. Selwyn Kojo. And when I say connected to Dr. Williams, I mean we are Trinidadians, we are connected in some way. Those from Andrews University, Dr. Bedney, Dr. Gray, the other scholars that we had here, Dr. Boyce Davies and Dr. Warner. Then we had those who have a combination of alliances, Dr. David Williams, Dr. Walter Maury, Dr. Selwyn Kojo, he too has a combination of alliances. Special thanks, though, to Mrs. Erica Williams Connell for her contribution and support. And a very special thank you to Dr. Desmond Hartwell Maury, being the visionary behind all of this. I don't know that any of us coming in would have expected what we got today. May God continue to bless your efforts even going forward. And I will end with this. Knowledge is power. What does that mean? And I'll use Bloom's taxonomy, 3 levels. Know, understand, apply. We know where, especially after today, to some degree, where we came from. After today, we now understand, we have an idea as to where we are and how are we going to apply. So I will charge all of us today to apply what we now know and understand by how we change our world. Go change the world.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. All right. So maybe we might have to organize another one of these.
We leave that in your hands, Desmond.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, then. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Okay,
Thank
bye-bye.
you and goodbye.
All right, bye-bye.